Let's talk about the big domestic headline this week. IVF. This past week, a single Republican lawmaker blocked legislation that would have created federal protections for IVF access nationwide. Cindy Hyde-Smith, who blocked the bill, said it was, quote, vast overreach. Do you support federal protections for IVF?
What I support is that we make sure that every parent has the right to have those fertility processes. I had my two children through fertility. I want every parent who wants that blessing to be able to have that, and government shouldn't do anything to stop it.
So should there be federal protections for people for IVF?
I think there should be protections for the embryos so that parents feel like they're protected and respected. But I think the conversation of what happens with those embryos has to be between the parents and the physician. Period. We don't need to go and create a bunch of laws for something when we don't have a problem. There is not a problem in terms of what is happening, so we shouldn't have government create one. This is not a hard thing. When parents decide they want to have a baby and they can't, the blessing that Michael and I had to be able to go through the fertility processes to have our babies was a personal one that we wanted to have just with our doctor. We don't want to have that conversation with government.
You're saying that the decision should be between parents and the physician, no one else. Why doesn't that same standard apply to an abortion, for example?
Well, what I've said is this should be in the hands of the people, for the people to decide. They should decide whether their states are going to be pro-life or pro-choice. They should decide whether their states are going to be IVF or not IVF. I personally think we want as many fertility options for people as they can. That's my opinion. But other states may decide something different. Alabama was going in one direction. I don't think that's a direction you want to go. The same way I don't think that the conversations that people have been having on abortion are good conversations. They divide people instead of bringing people together. And I think these need to be handled with respect and humanizing these situations instead of demonizing them.
You have said embryos are babies. It sounds like you don't want the government involved when it comes to IVF, but you do when it comes to abortion.
My personal opinions is that embryos are babies. Somebody else's may be different. I treated the way Michael and I looked at it was we always looked at it that way. But everybody looks at this differently, and you are looking at a situation where, one, you're not talking about masses of embryos, but two, you've got to talk with your doctor about what's viable and what's not. It's a very technical process that you can't just blanket a law around.
Well, and that's why I just want to get the bottom line here, because as you rightfully say, IVF is a process in which embryos are sometimes destroyed or donated. Do you support IVF as it is practiced in the United States?
Yes, of course.
And should there be federal protections for that?
Yes, to make sure that IVF is there, to make sure that parents have it, all of that. But keep in mind, too, even when you're talking about the issue of abortion, and I don't think the fellas have talked about it well at all, we have to go back to what is it that we want. We all want to say, how do we save as many babies as possible and support as many moms as possible? That's why I've said with a federal law, rather than going and demonizing this issue, let's find consensus and say, why can't we come together on banning late-term abortions? Why can't we come together on encouraging adoptions? Why can't we come together on saying doctors and nurses who don't believe in abortion shouldn't have to perform them? Why can't we come together and say contraception should be accessible? And why can't we come together and say no state can tell a woman who's had an abortion she's going to jail or getting the death penalty? Why don't we just start there?
Is consensus realistic, though? This is an issue that's been debated for over 50 years. Is that realistic consensus?
Consensus is available when you tell the American people the truth. The American people have been told to have options that aren't realistic. You can't get consensus unless you have a majority of the House, 60 Senate votes, and a signature of a president. That's not going to happen without consensus.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.